Coffee is a big part of my day. Not only does it help me get through the morning, but I just really love the taste of good quality beans. Trade is a subscription service that brings great coffee from indie roasters all over the country right to your door. Tell Trade what you typically like, whether it's espresso or single origins or even decaf, even how you like to make your coffee, and they will recommend the right beans for you. Or you can just choose from over 450 different coffees. Then you select how often you'd like the coffee delivered to you. Shipping is always free, by the way. And if you need to skip a week or so, just do that. You can do it. No charge at all. Then pick back up when you're ready to get beans delivered to your door again. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to get started with Trade today and start getting some of the best coffees in the country delivered to your door. That's unitedwedrink.com/trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the United We Drink podcast right here on UnitedWeDrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and I am joined here again by my two lovely co-hosts, Kevin Abbott.
Lovely. I like that.
Yeah, I'm trying something different. I'm trying to be positive.
42 years old, and I've never been
not
called
funny.
lovely. I want it to happen again.
No, go ahead.
That guy is here too, Tim Johnson.
I just turned 45, Kevin, and I have also never been called lovely. I've been called a lot of things. Lovely is not one of them.
How many of them also begin with the letter L?
Well, I have loser, leper for some reason.
Yeah, there was this one time that a person called me a leper.
I think they just thought I could jump really high and didn't understand what the right word was.
Oh yeah, no, I'm certain that's it.
Someone once called me a leopard. They were trying to say leper, but they accidentally said the animal instead.
Yeah, someone called me lugly. I think they just added a letter in front of the word they were trying to say.
I think that's one of those what's it called, a portmanteau?
Portmanteau, yeah.
Is a combination of lovely and ugly. So they were calling you a lovely ugly person. So
they were saying I was.
So you got called lovely.
Is that like being the nicest guy in prison? Being a good-looking ugly person?
It's like being the valedictorian when you're homeschooled.
All good analogies. I like this. We should just keep this going.
Welcome to the Analogies podcast, brought to you today by the letter L. So
off the rails within the first 5 minutes, guys.
That's how we do it over here on United We Link.
So dumb.
Dumbest. We're the dumbest. All right, gentlemen, what are we drinking here tonight? I'll start things off. I'm not feeling great, so I am completely NA tonight. I'm having some Lagunitas Hoppy Refresher and a can of Spindrift Lime, if you care of the flavor.
You and that Spindrift.
I love Spindrift. Kevin's on Team Spindrift.
Nice.
Tim, what are you drinking?
I am drinking Tom's. It is so there is a local brewery here that has done really well. Started by a couple of industry veterans called Falling Knife. And Tom Berg, the owner, they literally made just a classic American light lager called Tom's. And it is like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, it won Best in Show at the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild Awards, and it's a very great drink. But honestly, it's Tom's with two M's, like a Ham's.
I was gonna
Because
say, is this like a thing that's supposed to be like a Ham's reference?
yeah, it is. It is, but it is actually it's just one of those things that it I would say it's more noticeably craft than Hams, right? So out of all of the light lagers that are through eventually we all learned in the craft brewing industry that we just need to appeal to light lager drinkers, and plus we all just love drinking light lagers, right? Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
As much as we love, an IPA or a Hefeweizen or
Multi red, double red ale.
a double red, quadruple red, multi hoppy ale.
All the ones that are out there that I can totally name off the top of my head.
Call back.
but no, we all realize that sometimes you just want to crush a light lager. This one I feel is like a little bit more noticeably craft, but it's still really good. And since I'm friends with those guys and I really like that, I haven't gotten this in a while. I saw it in the liquor store. It was on a discount actually. And I was like, well, shoot, I'd be dumb to not pick this up. And so I picked some of this up, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Ham's is from the Twin Cities, right?
Land of Sky Blue Waters, man. Yeah.
Okay.
My dad has mentioned that commercial to me many, many, many times, and talking about like the classic craft or the classic beers from different regions of the country. So I'm sure he'll enjoy that part of the podcast. Keeping with the theme, I have Bench Life by Green Bench, which I actually have not cracked yet. I'm going to drink that in a little bit. I've got this bad boy, little Headhunter West Coast style IPA from Fatheads. I love this beer. It's amazing. And it's one of those beers I haven't noticed down here in a while.
It hasn't been down here for a while.
So
they just came back to the state.
So I'm glad you said that, because sometimes I feel like I just didn't notice it on the shelf. But this beer is amazing. It is a true West Coast. It is just fantastic. And it will be on Old Favorite Friday here very shortly. And I have some really good things to say about it. I mean, I remember when Fatheads took over like GABF or World Beer Cup. They medaled like 6 times one year at one of the ceremonies that I was at, and they continue to just crush it with this beer and others. I think they just got 3 medals the other night at the World Beer Cup. But other than the fact that this beer is amazing and everyone should drink it, this is something that you guys will see, but I will narrate it since I know that this is a podcast and not a television show. But if you look at that can, you go, well, that's just a nice little can. And then you pull the little part off, and it's a completely different brewery's can. Mad Tree Phantom Forest Juicy Imperial IPA. So
they must have bought someone's excess cans.
I was gonna say, I recognize several times when breweries have had to sell off cans.
It's just something I've never seen before, and you just kind of notice it with the way the sleeve goes on. You can just get a little hint of purple coming over the top of it, and so of course, I got to investigate. I mean, bravo! I think it's great that they do that, but it's like a little Easter egg. I wish I would have tried this beer as well. It probably wouldn't be as good as the Fatheads, Headhunter, but now you got me curious.
Sorry, I was going to say, typically up here, when people do that, they sleeve them in black and then they wrap them with labels.
Sounds like so much extra money.
I don't know, man. The black sleeves are like dirt cheap, though.
And you have to have the shrink heat tunnel, right, to do that.
We have multiple mobile vendors that will literally bring that by and do that all in a day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, again, hey man, we're the land of sky blue waters. We're the land of we have a great brewing tradition in this state, right? So Hams and Glicks and shells and all these things. So we've been a great brewery forever, but also as a craft brewery, we have had so many like, 7 different mobile canners and all these different like mobile units that go around. And so there are literally people that just have mobile shrink tunnels and they'll just bring them by your brewery with your shrinks and put them on all in a day. They'll do an entire, what is it, 8,169 cans on a pallet.
I'll believe you with
Yeah,
that number.
I'm pretty sure that's the number. I don't know. It's been a while since I've had to think about that, but yeah.
I do have to point. I do have to point out as someone who is not from that area and doesn't know like the breweries and things. But when you just say hams and clicks and shell, it sounds like you're just saying random words. Pens, doorknobs, computer monitors.
I mean, you have
I'm
to,
not throwing shade. I'm just saying from someone
No.
without context, it sounded like you might have just had a seizure and started saying words.
Well, just think about all of the German heritage that we have here. We have a very large. I mean, literally, these towns that are German and like.
You also have a
all-
lot of Scandinavian
Well,
culture.
obviously, we're mostly Scandinavian, but like literally, the towns with breweries in them, New Ulm,
Yeah.
New Prague, like they're literally all of these. They're like the new versions of like German and Czech towns, right? Like it's this, especially because like in the 1800s and even the earlier part of the 1900s, it was all about like reselling all these things. Like we still have people that still celebrate May Day, which is a European tradition. Like we're very much a European um uh state, right? Like we're not like down in Florida, you have your Caribbean influence, and you have your Spanish influence, and you have your
Trash
like
influence.
yeah.
Of the white
We have
variety.
we all have that kind of like that traditional, not only Nordic, but a lot of German and Czech heritage happens here. So yeah, we've been a brewing state for a very long time.
Yeah. Before we get into the main topic, there's actually something that I want to touch on real quick about the last episode. So, the day before the episode came out, the Labor Department for the federal government announced a new ruling on overtime exemptions, which slightly changes a little bit of what I was saying, but in favor of the workers. So starting July 1st, employees need to make a minimum of $43,888 per year to be overtime exempt. And that number goes up to $58,656 on January 1st of 2025. So the number that I had given previously went out the window. All the other classifications. So I still maintain by my completely not lawyer opinion that brewery employees do not classify for overtime exemption anyway because they don't fall under any of the professional roles. But to those that tried to fight that and argue against that, now your employees need to make a minimum of practically $44,000 a year to even be considered for overtime exemption. So
even if their salary. Yep. Nope. I love it. I think it's a great way to go. When you sent me that the other day, I was like, this is the way.
I wish it would have came out before the episode because, it makes me think that the federal government is out to get me. They're just there to undercut this show.
That's obviously true.
Yes.
No, I literally have a
Biden.
friend in the Biden administration, and I constantly tell him to fuck you. So it's totally fine.
So, I just wanted to put that out there and share that with you. I think that is a big, great thing for workers everywhere in the beer industry and elsewhere, so that you get paid for working overtime, or you don't work overtime.
Yeah.
Or it's pretty much one of three things. You get a raise up to that new floor limit, and you get overtime exempt. You get paid for your overtime, time and a half, or you don't work overtime anymore. 40 hours, you go home. Awesome. I think that's win-win for workers everywhere.
It'll be interesting to see how that gets applied. So, like, for instance, in this Minnesota, it is illegal to ask people what they make. So when they're applying for a new job, it's illegal to ask people what they make. I can tell you that I have reported multiple hiring companies for asking that question. So, like, when I've applied for a job and they've asked that, I don't stop my application. I literally just put in the extra notes. You need to understand you're breaking the law right now. And then I report it to the Department of Labor. But there's no, like, Department of labor oversight on that, right? It's just it's a law in theory, right? Or a law. It's a law in
It's
practice.
a state law.
Yeah, but it's not something that most employers are aware of, right? So similar to this overtime exemption, it's a law in practice, but unless employees are actively campaigning for that, if they're not actively standing up for themselves, I don't know that anyone's going to stop them from not doing that.
That is true, but that could come back and bite a company in the ass big time, because I mean, even if you're, I believe, even from a federal standpoint, even if you're ignorant of it, and an employee ends up suing for that, they're going to get all of their back pay, and the company's usually going to get fined big time from the
absolutely. But I think a lot of them are banking on the fact that employees are ignorant of their own rights.
And it's just, I think it's ultimately cheaper just to pay your employees what they are owed, rather than risk that bullshit.
You're not wrong, but
it's a gamble. It's a gamble that's that anyone's going to fight you on it. There's a brewery that I know that had a this happened several years ago, where a brewer sued them for all their back overtime pay, and it was a big hullabaloo down here that everyone talked about, and it was kind of well known that I don't know how it settled, but from my understanding, they got what they wanted. The employee got what they were owed out of it, but it's a gamble. If you continue to pay or flout the laws or what have you, and someone actually calls you on it, or maybe no one's going to call you on it for 30 years, and people think they got away with that, and then they're good.
Yeah, I mean, there are a billion things where people kind of expect that employees aren't going to know their rights, because employment law is tricky, and let's be honest. Like, I'm not saying that most brewers are experts on their own employment rights.
There is no way that I would have known this unless Mike was my friend and talked to me about this on this podcast. I would have no idea that this was the case.
So you would have known that as an owner. Can you imagine if any brewer would have known that?
No.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not okay.
I've been on both sides of this and know nothing. I've been on both sides of this and had no idea any of this existed.
Yeah. So
when I signed my first, I'm sorry, I'll let you talk. When I signed my first contract that said that this is how much money that I'm going to make on salary, I had no idea there was any kind of exemption or that you had to meet criteria. How the hell would I have known that? I'm sorry, Tim, please go ahead.
No. I was going to say, I'm going to let you finish, but Beyonce had the best video of the year. No, I really appreciate this. This is, like I said, we already went way too long, and that was my fault, because I get very passionate about that. We already went too long on that topic, and we could have done like a billion more. But we have a new topic we need to talk about. So why don't we talk about what we're going to talk about tonight?
Yeah, so let's take ourselves back what feels like 500 years, but it's about 5. Uh it is pre-pandemic, 2019, let's even look back 2018, 17, 16, the golden days of craft brewing. There's the industry is growing exponentially. More and more breweries opening. There's so much out there, possibilities for shelf space, draft space, and you're a fledgling brewery. You're doing well for yourselves. And what are you doing besides having your beer out there and having your tap room? You're doing events out in the market. You're doing stuff like tap takeovers, beer dinners, pint nights, beer fests, charity events, so on and so forth. We're in the year of someone's Lord 2024, and it seems like almost none of that is going on anymore. You used to be able to just throw a dart at a calendar of beer events and find something every single night of the week. And now I don't even know when the last time I have seen the words tap takeover next to one another, unless it might have been something somehow related to January 6th. But they misspelled Jake Tapper's name or something like that. But man, like I don't know about you, Tim, being up there in Minnesota, but
Yeah.
like that seems like something that is just ages ago and that we don't see that much anymore.
Oh, no. Those died. I mean, you talk about the heyday of 4 or 5 years ago. Those died 4 or 5 years ago up here.
Because of COVID?
No,
Or were they going down prior to COVID?
because of the proliferation of breweries. You can't do a tap takeover because you're already struggling to fill your tap lines with all the different breweries and the new breweries that are coming on. A tap takeover would be terrible, right? Like we did tap takeovers in like 2012, 2013. And even then they started to die. Because no one wants to drink 7 of one brewery's beer. You couldn't do it because there's so many new ones. They wanted new ones. Well, like you even talk about beer dinner. Beer dinner is one. So the last time I did a beer dinner was probably 2018. And even the distributors, like I used to offer to distributors, right? Like, hey man, I'm a head brewer. I'll come out. I'll help sell the brand. Like, nah, they don't work anymore. Again, those worked in 2014 in Minnesota. By 2018, 2019, they already didn't work. Because people were all like, they're done with that.
I think it's just saturation. I think you have in any geographical area by what you're talking about, 2018,
Yeah.
what have you. You've had so many breweries, craft breweries in your area doing beer dinners. When it was 2012 or 2008,
Yeah.
2009, when I started, doing this, there were not that many breweries. There was 1 or 2 in your geographical area. So if someone was doing a beer dinner or a tap takeover, a local one, by the way, there wasn't that was special. That was unique.
Yeah.
If you were Dogfish Head and you were the kind of brewery that had 16 beers feasibly that could be in a market to do a total tap takeover of some specialty craft beer place, that was special and unique. But then brewery after brewery, and I'm speaking specifically about Florida, came into the area and did them. Southern Tier and Dogfish Head and the brewery and, Terrapin. And I'm just thinking about all the ones that were done at Coffee District, which was my local craft beer bar that would do these tap takeovers. And even when I was just getting into the industry, they were dying because each one of these tap takeovers were attended by less and less people. Because it got to the point where not only were people trying to try the new stuff, but everyone had had those beers already. It wasn't
And
unique,
it wasn't
and
special.
yeah, and then the bar was pissed off because then they had this great event that they wanted to get all these people in for, and now they're left with 10 at the sometimes big tap takeovers, but even 4 or 5, 10 sixtels with 6 pints taken out of each one of them.
Yeah.
And now they've got to sell that instead of selling their other beers, and it gums up their lines. I think there's a lot of reasons why those stopped working, but the biggest one is saturation.
You're right, and I hate to use the word saturation because I've always hated the idea that craft is at a bubble, because I still don't believe craft is at a bubble. You think about the number of restaurants that close every 30 minutes, but you're right. It's just that there's a consumer preference and they don't care. And then, yeah, it is that's another point. It's a huge pain in the ass for those restaurants. As great it is to burn through sixtels, if I have 7 sixtels of the same brand, like my whole point as a bar manager is to have a diverse lineup, and not just a diverse lineup of styles, but a diverse lineup of brands. So if I now have 7 half full sixtels that I have to get through, after that tap takeover is done, now what am I going to do? I'm probably going to put that at a discount. I'm not going to make any money on it. It becomes, I even thought, like, even when they were hot, I still thought it was a lousy idea. We talked about it, like, back in 2011 when I was at Buffalo Wild Wings. Those always came up, and we were always like, yeah, that's neat for a night, but what are we going to do with that the night after? So even in the heyday, I thought they were a terrible idea.
I think what we're coming to, and Mike, I think you should chime in on this at some point, because I'd like to get your take on this.
He's not allowed to talk.
But I think it's one of those things that was always a good idea in concept, but even when they were popular, they sucked. And even when they were popular, they weren't that popular. At least down here.
Yeah. Agreed. No, up here as well. Agreed.
Yeah. So I think that's one of those deals with the tap takeover. Mike, why don't you chime in on the tap takeover? Because I then do want to move on to the beer dinner, because I got a lot to say about those.
Yeah. I mean, I remember at my first brewery, we did 2 very silly, very stupidly large amounts of tap takeovers. We did one at Tap 42, which, if you don't know by its name, it has 42 taps. We took over all 42 taps. Or you know what? I think we did 41 because we only had 1 nitro beer and they had 2 nitro handles. So like Guinness was also one.
What do you have 42 beers to put on there? That's the dumbest thing I've heard of.
A lot of treatments and a lot of vintage beers. We then also did a 50 tap takeover at a World of Beer.
This is our blood orange. This is our navel orange. This is our
basically
tang.
what it was. and you know who loved those events even less than the consumer? The distributor.
Oh, distributors hate them.
They're like, what do you mean we have to bring in like 40 new SKUs that are just going to be 1 keg?
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
Well, that's a great point, Mike, because I don't, once again, I know we get people listening from all over the country, and I know there's different dynamics with distribution all over the country, but down in this area, we've seen a shrinking of true craft distributors that are open to the one-off kegs. I right now, the Funky Buddha is doing an independent beer fest, celebrating their independence, and they asked us to sell them a keg for the event. So I wanted to give them a beer that is a one-off that is not going to be sold anywhere but our tap room. My direct brand rep for Gold Coast is awesome. He's a good dude. He always fights for us. But when I talk to him about this, I know that he might say, no, they rejected it. He says, I'll push it through. I'll take care of you. But to get one slim of a specialty beer approved, get
is
a
already
SKU
sold.
number. It's already sold. But to get a SKU and to go through all the stuff with Reyes Beverage is a true pain in the ass. And it's definitely a favor. It's a favor I'm calling in from a dude that's like, yeah, this is gonna be a pain in the ass. I'll make this happen for you.
Well, and you're calling
And
into
that's
a
how
guy.
it's changed.
Well, and you're calling it into a guy that like makes way more money off of not you, right?
100%. But the thing is that 10, 15 years ago, I'm with Brown Distributing. And Brown Distributing, for anyone who wanted to give them shit and some things rightfully so, they were craft centric. They'd approve everything. They'd approve. I mean, they might not like it. They might have somebody over their head going, we got to stop doing this, but they would approve everything. And
So
Microman and all these little distributors that were so craft centric that got sold out or bought or what have you. And that consolidation has made it to the point where I've got 4 SKUs. That's what's available. I can't do a tap takeover for more than 4 SKUs.
well, so no, we've talked on this podcast before about how you could market the same beer under 7 different names. I've always wanted to do a tap takeover where I just send the same beer in and I just put a different name on each tap handle and see how people go. Because I guarantee you, like at least 30% of the consumers will honestly think there's a differce.
And
Just
then
make sure it's a hazy IPA and you got it.
you get on a megaphone after about an hour and a half and go, ha 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 ha, ha fooled you, all
Yeah.
of you. And then they hate you forever and never buy your stuff again.
Yeah, whatever.
This is all great business advice. I think someone should listen to everything we have to say and try to implement it in a brewery. And then when they're poor and homeless, you can blame us.
Okay, no, that sounds good. Hey, let's move on to beer dinners though, because Kevin, I know you have a lot of thoughts. I have thoughts as well, but I want to hear your thoughts before I chime in.
This is kind of Kevin's bread and butter.
I mean, to a certain extent, I come from the wine world originally. I was a wine steward for 7 years before I got into beer. So food and wine are synonymous. Food and beer, especially 15, 20 years ago, were not, at least at any meaningful level in the cultural zeitgeist. So I did a lot of wine dinners. And I'll tell you this, I worked at a very nice restaurant. I had $700 bottles of wine on the wine list. I'd sell thousands and thousands of dollars of wine a night. My wine dinners never did well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very specific person that wants to pick a specific day to come out and have a created menu for them. It's just hard. It's hard to market to those people. Now, this is way pre like the blow up of social media marketing and stuff when I was doing this. Maybe it's much different now and the wine crowd does that much more often. But I think it's always been difficult depending on no matter what you're doing. But the beer dinners were such a like and I love them, but I feel like they were a desperate stab to say, look, we're fancy and good and flavorful, and we can do this just like wine. And and they were everywhere. Every restaurant was asking for them. And I think just like tap takeovers, I can't remember a time when they were successful. I can't remember a time when they sold out. I remember when they were more well attended. I remembered when they were being marketed more. But I've been involved in beer dinners in 3 different companies. And from the very beginning, I remember having empty seats and people saying, "Oh, it'll be better next time when we come back next month."
So I think this is a regional difference. So not to generalize Florida.
Please do.
Generalize away.
Okay. I mean, obviously, you have your own, Florida man ethos and all of that.
How dare you? How?
But also like, Florida also has a lot of wealthy people. Let's not forget that. Like wealthy Minnesotans spend half their time in Florida. Wealthy Floridians don't spend half their time in Minnesota, right? So you do have like an entirely different thing, and I think you have a different expectation. And so a lot of the beer dinners that I used to do when they were very successful, they again, we also don't have like great winery. Like everyone loves to talk about like Minnesota wineries and like um the University of Minnesota is actually very well known for both apple and grape cultivars, but we don't grow either of those things well here. We just don't. So they can cultivate, they can do that, but we don't do that. And so anyone who brags about a Minnesota winery is dumb.
We can do that, but we don't do that.
Well, you know what I mean is we can make them great, but we can't grow them great. Like we can make them something that someone else can grow well. I So we've never been a great wine dinner culture. And beer dinners were a great culture for that. And so I think about some of the ones like I literally worked with like James Beard chefs on doing beer dinner pairings. I've talked to like some of these amazing chefs from all over the world. We literally would sit down and we would plan a menu. I used to do all of these beer and like there was one actually where literally the chef had put together the entire pairing with our beers without consulting me, and I was so excited because I got to experience it with everyone, and then I got to talk through this is what you're feeling, this is what you're seeing, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm tasting, those types of things. So they for a while were really really great because we had a culture that was so anxious to have that experience that I feel like would have been kind of passe in Florida at the time. We didn't have those. We didn't have wine pairing dinners. We're not a region where that's a thing that happened.
So this kind of goes back to what you were saying before about the long brewing history in the state, and people who like their beer more than they like their wine, seeing like beer dinner. Oh, that sounds interesting. And being more hyped up on that than a wine dinner would be.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We're home to the very first Master Cicerone in the entire country. Like we're one of those things where we wanted to learn beer. Uh, say what you will about the Cicerone. We'll get into that in a different conversation. But the reality is like I loved those beer dinners because I would get to talk to these chefs and we'd plan menus or we'd talk about these things. But then also when I just loved to be able to sit up and as each course was served with a different beer, talk about man, if there's a job that could actually pay me to literally just always do beer dinners, my favorite role in the history of the world. A, I love talking. B, I love eating. C, I love drinking. D, I love bullshitting. Like all of those things together.
You would have never gotten any of that from listening to the show, would you?
But like literally, the whole thing was so great. Like I used to be able to just like we would do these things at these restaurants, like on a nice country club or out these restaurants at the lake or these chef driven restaurants or all these things. I would get to be able to do all of these things. It was so much fun. It wasn't bullshit, and people were really really into it, and people would like we'd have to turn people away, and they were fully attended, and they were all over that. But it also kind of reached a point of like what Kevin said earlier, saturation. So it wasn't about that people weren't interested. It just became overwhelming to the point that it was almost hard to sustain. And then people lost interest. But again, they didn't lose interest because they don't love beer and they don't love beer food pairings, or they still don't want to know. As big of a market as we are for craft beer, and as much as I still think that we're a top 10 market for craft beer, and as much as I still think we still have a I don't want to sound insulting, but an uneducated beer market, like a naive beer market.
That's countrywide. I don't think that's anything to do with your state.
Sure, but I do think there's something where it was the restaurants that got burnt on it, right? The distributors that got burnt out on it, and the brewers that kind of gave up on them. I still think there's a market for them. I would still really like to do them. I'd like if
Me too.
if I knew if I knew I could make money on doing it, I certainly would. They're one of my favorite things, and my favorite thing about it wasn't talking about the beer. It was talking to people about the beer. It's talking to people about what beer is and what styles are, and some of those things. That's still one of my favorite things to this day. Is like I don't want to say education. 'Cause education sounds like cocky, but like no, it's education, like teaching people about these things. And then the flavors and the because I geek out on like flavors and esters and all of those things and the pairings. That's the thing that was fun. And we lost those and I miss that.
Talking to people who want to hear that type of stuff still does get me giddy inside. I feel like there was a sweet spot for beer dinners down here. I can't really pinpoint when, but I do recall going to some beer dinners that were sold out like pretty quickly, and I've definitely been to ones that didn't do so well. And I know that we have done some as a brewery over the last couple years that seem to have been varying degrees of success. So it just shows that it's still kind of there to not depend. I think it truly depends on even just the micro location. Like all of these places are within our county, but like Palm Beach Gardens might be up for it, but Wellington might not, and they're only like really 20 minutes away from one another.
Yeah, well, the beer dinner thing kind of falls into the same trap as the tap takeover. You have to get an
it does kind of too, because I mean, they're usually you're bringing in a beer on draft. You're bringing in more beers on draft than what you might have like one handle at this particular restaurant normally,
Yeah.
like year round.
Bringing a lot of package, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're asking a lot of the account, who then could be left with a lot of leftover stuff that they bought in, and now they're like, well, what do we do with this afterwards?
Yeah, it's kind of like a tap takeover on steroids, frankly.
Yeah. Kevin, this is, I think, an interesting thing for you, because you guys also did beer dinners at your brewery. Do you still do throwdowns? I feel like I haven't seen that in a long time, unless I'm missing
No.
those posts.
No, so I think that, and this was not me. This was actually more Phil Palmisano and this woman Lauren, who was working with
Oh,
us for
Phil.
a while. And I think I had something to do with some of the concepts, but I can't take credit for this. But they came up with an idea of having basically a blind menu that a chef would prepare, and that two breweries would bring a select amount of beers, 4 beers we'd do, and we'd just bring beers that we thought could pair with a wide range of food, and we'd have to pair them on the fly. So the chef says, okay, the first course is ceviche. Okay, which one of my 4 pre-selected beers is going to go with the ceviche? And the customer gets to decide who wins. And we did these for years. We had a dedicated following. We sold out every one of our things for years doing this. We brought in local breweries, we brought in national breweries, and it got to a point where I've seen these throwdown style dinners. And I'm not saying that we created it out of whole cloth. Maybe Phil got some ideas from other places, but We had never seen anything like this until we did it. And then it got to a point where we were seeing these exact style dinners all around us. Restaurants were doing them, other breweries were doing them. So I feel like at least locally, we inspired a lot of people because it was a really great way to get people involved in it. It wasn't just talking to people, it was giving them a voice, letting them go, well, I think that Pilsner did better with that dish than the sour ale or what have you. And I love doing them. And Tim, to kind of reiterate what you were saying, the conversations I would have as I said, okay, I did this triple with this Thai food dish, and being able to walk around and go, well, what did you like better? What did you think? Was this a good pairing? Was it not a good pairing? And working the room, not to get votes. I never cared who won. I just wanted to talk about food and beer in a way that got people thinking. And people,
it's a fun conversation.
And the best part about it is we did several beer versus wine.
Yeah.
And this was my jam. And I remember a woman coming and saying, I'm a wine drinker. My friend brought me here. I didn't think you would get any of my votes, and you got one course from me. You got one course. You convinced me on one course that beer was better than wine. By the way, I won every wine versus beer pairing I ever did. But just having that kind of conversation with someone was wonderful. Anyway, long story short, we did these for years. We stopped doing them because we have a exclusive food partner that's a food truck that's parked outside our place that we used to do guest chefs every month. That became untenable. Getting people that came in that knew we had to give them a set amount of money to make the dishes, make sure they were substantial. It was really, really hard. Then we brought in a consistent chef, and they did a great job every time. But then they started getting too busy, and they didn't want to do them anymore because it was no longer profitable for them. And we had to discontinue them. And the last night was sold out, and I was dressed to the nines, and I gave a big speech about how much I appreciate it because 50% of the people showed up for every one. And I would bring them back today if I could. Because just like you, Tim, that's what I want to do. I want to talk about beer and food. I want to get people excited about these things. I want to have those conversations and cultivate that environment. But there's so many barriers in the way, not the least of which is who makes money.
Yeah.
Who actually profits from this? Does the restaurant that has to close down an entire section and sell a prefix ticket for really nice food that maybe they're not making as much as they normally would on, and they have to buy extra beer that they wouldn't have had to do, and oh, by the way, they're only 60% capacity? Are they making money? And if they're not, they don't do them anymore.
Yeah, man, I love talking about beer, but that's why we have a podcast, not because I make money from it.
Well, but at the end of the day, that's somebody needs to make money you're not going to. And by the way, there are passionate people out there that are going to say, I own a restaurant. I don't give a shit if I make money. I want to do a beer and food dinner. Great. I'm all for it. But those are few and far between. And by the way, just I'll give the floor over, but I've recorded 3 videos now of a food and beer pairing weekly series that I'm going to do with Barrel of Monks. So I'm doing my old favorite Friday videos, but I'm going to our accounts and picking out one of our beers, one of their food items, doing 2 to 4 minute videos, just saying, hey, this is Single in Havana. It's a Belgian blonde ale with guava. This goes really well with this food item. This is why it goes really well with this food item. Bing, bang, boom. I'm promoting them. I'm talking about our beer. The business is all covered. But at the end of the day, I get to talk about why you should be thinking about the beer you order with the food you order. And that's going to scratch that itch for me.
Okay. So, side note here, sorry listeners, but I'm going to say, Kevin, I need to come down and not only record an old favorite Friday with you, I need to come down and do a beer food pairing with you. I think that would be amazing.
Whenever you come down, man, we'll knock a bunch of stuff out.
I love it. That's fantastic. Man,
I'm here too.
Whatever, Mike. Man, we've already covered a lot of stuff in this episode.
Yeah. So let's. I think that there's some small time stuff in there that we don't really need to touch on. But let me ask you this: in today's market and world. For Are there beer events out in the market, not necessarily in your tap room, or not necessary? Absolutely not talking about in your tap rooms, but out in the market. Are there events that you see, do, think work? Kevin,
No.
perfect. Tim, no. So
I just don't. I'll just expand on that really quickly. I don't see anything that's consistently successful. The only thing that's been successful for us, I'm talking about bottom line. I'm not talking about the passion of beer. I obviously still have that, but I care about the bottom line in being healthy and being able to grow because I have to. There is nothing that we're doing other than working directly with our best accounts to super serve them and make sure they're happy with us personally and that the beer is selling well. And there has been nothing that I've been able to do. I proposed a lot of different events. We were doing for a while at the brewery before our food truck got too busy. We would do these mini pairings where you do like 4 different sliders and 4 different beer items, and you can come in at any time. It wasn't a sit down meal. And they were wildly successful. Wildly successful. We do 100 orders of this thing in a day. And I brought them to different restaurants and said, hey, why don't we do this? And 1 or 2 would bite and they do okay, but it'd be hard to get people to buy into it. So no, we haven't found anything in the last 5 years that moves the needle at all.
what about up there, Tim?
Man, I really love being contrarian. I really love being different. But I'm going to say no. Like they just I hate the term saturation because it implies some sort of bubble. And no, we're too saturated. I don't think anyone gives a fuck. I don't. I just don't think they do. So, there are some niche events like the Food and Wine Expo where brewers can get in and they might find some certain influencers and they might move the needle a little bit. But the reality is, no. I if I were a brewery in Minnesota today, I wouldn't go to any festival. I'd submit my beers to the Craft Brewers Guild just so you can develop a reputation. I think honestly, developing a reputation amongst your peers is more important than developing a reputation amongst the consumers. Because your peer, I know it sounds weird, but here's the thing: is your peers are going to actually develop your rep more than you think. So it used to be like, you know what? Like Badger Hill used to be like, oh, you guys are the most underrated brewery in the state, blah, 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 blah. But lately what it is like literally like once you get a little bit more in there, you get into other things. Because this is still very much a collaborative environment. My favorite thing about Minnesota is how collaborative it is. My time in the distilling industry is they're all competitive and they're dicks, and I don't like the way distributors work. But breweries are still to this day very collaborative. If you can make inroads, dude, I'm drinking a brewery's beer that I've never worked at, but I love these guys. I never even did a collab with these guys, but I also know that I could always. Friends were in town, and I said, "Hey, can I bring some friends over and give us a tour?" And he will. Tom will do that. That develops a reputation more than anything else. But as far as events, nah, fuck that.
How about you, Mike?
I disagree with Tim on kind of that. I don't think that the accolades of your peers is more important than the consumer. I think that it is important to a certain standpoint, and it's always nice to have feedback, especially honest feedback from your peers on stuff like that. But I see community as being like where really the future is, especially for breweries of like smaller size. And those types of events, if you will, are collaboration with local charities, other local businesses, local artists, doing like a beach cleanup with a sponsor of a local business, like a surf shop or something like that. Doing can artwork with different artists, having pop-up markets with local vendors, being a part of community or charity events out and about by like donating beer and having yourselves be seen out there. I think those types of things, like those are like kind of marketing stuff right now. I think that is really where it is at right now. The beer there's some places out there that are still doing beer dinners and still doing great. The Butcher and the Bar in Boynton Beach, they still do a monthly dinner. They do different beer dinners. They do spirits dinners, wine dinners with different of their like top vendors that they have there, and they do great with them. They still sell out of almost every single one of them. So there are places that still do that well, but I think that it's all about community at this point in time for events that really move the needle in a positive way for your company, for your brand, and for your community.
I think that's really well said.
Yeah,
I think that's really well said.
Look, Mike. I'm always welcome to be wrong, and I really appreciate that you told me that I'm wrong. I just needed to understand that I'm not wrong.
So as adorable as that is, so I do want to make one big thing before we go is the biggest beer event that every brewery does is the festival, right? And there's still a festival every weekend. Honestly, there still is. At least I still get emails being asked to go to them constantly. I get emails. I just turned down a festival in Jacksonville. Our beer is technically distributed in Jacksonville. I stress technically because no one in their right mind can find a 6-pack of Wizard in Jacksonville. But I get asked for beer fests all the time. They're still all over the place. I think one of the most telling things about the beer industry, and to use the word that Tim, you did finally use, saturation, and I know it was painful to you, but I think that we always expected that the get drunk fests where people just went to drink as much beer as possible and they said, give me the dark one, or I'll have your IPA when you didn't have an IPA, or they go, what kind of IPA is this? A wheat beer? That kind of person. We thought we were going to convert them. I think we got some of them. But at the end of the day, if you went to a beer fest in Florida in 2005 and you go to one in 2024, I think it's pretty much the same thing. I don't think it's changed very much. There's still a bunch of people putting on beer fests with slinging the cheapest beer possible. It's all about exposure for your brand, and we're not going to pay for anything, and blah, blah, blah. And most breweries, not most, a lot of breweries have abandoned those because it does nothing for you. Because by the nature of alcohol, no one is going to remember that they drank your beer.
Yeah, I think Minnesota has matured beyond that. That would be the only thing that I would say is
Florida has not. Mike, do you agree?
I'm on the fence on that one. There are still a lot of those, but I feel like not as many, and we do not do a majority of them. Like
you might not probably get the emails, man, because I do. I'm telling you, I could still do a beer fest every single weekend.
That's fucking.
I don't think that was the case in Minnesota like 3 years ago. Anymore, it's not. It just isn't. Like I said, and I don't even think that's saturation as much as you're right. Saturation is a problem. I think it's just more maturity.
Yeah. So, and I think it depends on the festival. Some of the ones that have been around for a long time and have a good reputation tend to stick around a bit longer and have staying power over like the New Times Fort Lauderdale Beer Fest, that type of shit.
I feel like Fest is a whole separate side conversation.
Yes.
We need to
I
wrap
didn't want to
up,
get
but
too much in there because I think we've had an episode about it in the past, but we could certainly rehash that for an hour.
we should do that as a side thing because I feel like there's a lot to do. No, Kevin, I'm glad you brought it up. I was gonna bring it up earlier, but I was afraid because we're already healthily into this episode.
I think we should go 3 hours this time. I think we went 2 last. Every single episode with Tim, we add an hour, and eventually we're doing 24-hour podcasts.
I'm literally the one trying to cut us off this time. I just got very
that's
passionate
growth.
about pay.
That's growth.
All right, cool. So I think that was a fun conversation. Anyone want to add one last thing in that is literally like a minute, not going to go off on a tangent? All
nope.
Right. Let's head on into last calls, the point in the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want. Beer related, not beer related. The only rules are that it is uninterrupted, unopposed, and unobjected. Kevin, why don't you start us off?
Well, thank you, Mike. I have recently been listening to a podcast called The History of Rock and Roll Music in 500 Songs. It is... Tim is losing his mind over there. So that's okay. He's not going to say anything because this is last call, but we'll talk later. So I was referred to this podcast by my very good and personal friend, Penn Gillette, who I usually have to mention on every episode because he's my hero. But he talked about this. I didn't know it would be for me, but I started listening to it. It's by a guy named Andrew Hickey, who is a music historian and just lovely to listen to. It's about 30 minutes every episode, and he dives in, he picks, it's pretty much the history of rock and roll in 500 songs. He starts with song 1, and he started back in like 2018, 2019. I don't know if you know about how days work, but they're still working on these because it's not a daily podcast, it's a weekly podcast. So it's an amazing podcast. If you really love music, and I love music, I think I've mentioned this before the podcast started. I don't have a great ear. I don't know what timing is for a certain thing. I don't know what the Bo Diddley beat was. I don't know so much about music, even though I love music. And this has given me such a great appreciation of Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley. Listen, I grew up wanting to reject old music because I was young and hip, and I was hip. How old of a thing to say is that? But I was at that point, I was young and hip and wanted to like the new stuff. But it's given me such a great appreciation of music, and it ties so well into what's happening in music now. It's just brilliant. If you have any interest in music, if you have any expertise or understand musical theory in any way, you are going to love this podcast. And it is something that I've made it a point to listen to every song that he mentions as many as I can find to get into them. And I have actually found myself, I have my time alone sometimes on a Saturday night when I don't have to wake up early in the morning because Allie's taking care of Jad. And I get on my old NES Mini and I'm playing Legend of Zelda because that's what I want to do with my time at 12 o'clock in the morning. And I'm listening to Elvis Presley and appreciating Elvis Presley in a different way than I ever thought possible. And I'm just in the 1950s right now. I'm not that many episodes in. Eventually, I'm going to be listening to the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and all these great bands. And I can't wait to see what other music I find and that I appreciate on a different level. So if any of what I said that sounds good, there's books published on this. It's amazing. Just seek it out.
That sounds pretty cool. Tim.
Man, it's hard to not talk about his last call unobjected, unopposed, but I'm going to move on. Although I will say that I will second what he's saying. No, I want to talk about Major League Baseball. I don't know if either Kevin or Mike are interested at all in this subject. I'm kidding. Like
No.
we should literally just do like a whole. I don't even know who we tie it back to beer. We should just talk about Major League Baseball. But I want to talk about my Minnesota Twins because uh, today they just finished 10 wins in a row. Um, which they haven't done that since 2008. Um, uh, also, they still are like fourth in the AL Central. I don't know when the AL Central became like the go-to AL division. The AL Central has always been known for like the top three teams were like one game above 500. But right now, the AL Central are killing it. The Twins, 10 games in a row, and they're still fourth or third or fourth. They're killing it, and they're doing it because of the magic of summer sausage. If you have not learned about the magic of summer sausage, they have this summer sausage that they toss around as a good luck charm. So do yourselves a favor and just Google Minnesota Twins sausage. I know that's going to sound terrible. And put it in Minnesota. If you just Google twin sausage, that's going to be terrible. Don't do that. But if you do Minnesota Twins summer sausage, you're going to see what they're doing, and it is fantastic. It's been so fun to see, like, they've slowly got people back, like Correa, and they just bought Neuron back into the lineup. They've been struggling, but it's been so much fun to see, and it's just Rocco Baldelli, the manager, is like he's like my age, and he's like equally exasperated and excited about this entire thing because he's like, this is gonna be terrible when it falls, but it's great. So please, this season of Major League Baseball, I think might be plus because the Astros are terrible this year. So I think we can all get behind why, like, how great that is. They're a nightmare team. I think this season of Major League Baseball might be one of the favorites in the last 10 years. So I don't know, man. Just go Twins.
As of recording of this, 21 wins, Philadelphia Phillies, number one in baseball. But no, that is a fun thing. I mean, you just played the White Sox, but that's a different thing. But
Unobjected, unopposed, Michael.
sorry. So I wanted to talk about last week. I bought my first ever film camera. I came across a listing on Craigslist for a late 1970s, probably a 78 or 79 Nikon FE, being sold by a gentleman about 20 minutes north of here, along with 3 lenses, tripod, flash, books, so much stuff for a silly price. And my thought when I went to go take a look at it was, if the lenses by themselves are in decent condition, this is more than worth the price. And come to find out, the guy was selling this stuff for an elderly friend who was the original owner of all of this stuff, very much cared about photography, and the stuff was in excellent condition, just needed some cleaning up. No scratches on any lenses. They all had lens caps on them. Great stuff. I ordered some rolls of film from the a company that I was recommended by some friends, Film Photography Project on online, because where do you buy film really locally anymore? And it took 8 days to get to me, thanks USPS from New Jersey. Got lost for a couple days, but I am super stoked to be trying a kind of different format of a art form that I really love and enjoy. The only thing that makes me a little bit sad about this is that I didn't get into this a little sooner before my father-in-law passed away a couple years ago, because he was an award-winning film photographer in his day and was in the process of building a dark room in his garage to start developing his own film again, before cancer really took hold of him. So I really wish that he was around to teach me some stuff. But I look forward to being able to do some stuff with this in his honor, and I am super duper excited about this.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
pretty awesome.
Tim, do you want to plug anything?
God, this is where I really want to just do Gators Daily.
Is it just Twitter account with Gator posted every day, or Instagram?
Yeah. Just go to the Gators Daily. That's what I'm gonna do.
Kevin? Chihuahuas Daily?
I recently had somebody leave a comment on one of my old favorite Friday videos and say, like, why do you keep talking about other people's beer? Like, talk about your beers. And that's not the point, guys. Not that that person is listening to this podcast, so they absolutely are not. I'm plugging Old Favorite Friday. You don't want to know why? Because I love beer. It's what I really, really get into and what I get excited about when I get Fatheads, West Coast IPA, Headhunter, and go, oh my God, this is amazing. It's available down here and no one's throwing a parade. It makes me genuinely angry, because there's so many mediocre beers out there, and celebrating other people's beers that are not totally self-serving is kind of the most important thing we can do in the industry. So if you love beer as much as I do and get a chance to be passionate about this, go over to Barrel of Monks, Instagram, all of our social media accounts, go to our YouTube channel, follow us, and let's talk about incredible classic beers, because that's what we do this for. I can talk about Verdant Embrace, which I'm drinking right now. Ralph Renault, shout out, one of the best IPAs I've ever had. I can do that on this podcast, but every week I want to talk about beers that are not ours, because that's much cooler.
I actually just want to plug real quick a TV show, Ripley on Netflix. It's a great story, but it is one of the most breathtakingly, beautifully shot shows I have seen in a long, long, long time. I am not the biggest black and white fan, but this just has such stunning visuals and cinematography to it. Please do go watch it. Other than that, we will be back here in a couple weeks. Oh, yeah. Go buy stuff on our website. Go to unitedwedrink.com and go to the Brands We Love page. If you buy stuff from those wonderful places like Made In, Cookware, Trade Coffee, Liquid Death Water, all of that, we get a little kickback for that, and we appreciate that support. We also have shirts, buttons, stickers, totes, and all that great stuff on our web store, unitedwedrink.com/store. We'll be back in a couple weeks with another brand new episode coming at you. Thanks, everyone, once again for joining in. Cheers.
Cheers.